The Nintendo Switch is nearly 8 years old, and in that time they have released so many absolutely incredible Nintendo Switch games. And the best part is, not only have there been great first-party games, but also a ton of incredible indie games that has made this console one of the best of all time. But the issue is, not every game is a good one. And today we're going to be talking about all the Nintendo Switch games that I regret buying. Now, of course, this list is just my personal opinion, and not all the games on this list are ones I regret buying because they're bad. Some of these are games that I simply regret picking up for full price as I don't feel it's worth it. Others might be great games, just with bad Nintendo Switch ports. And some of them I just simply didn't enjoy. And we're going to start off today's video with one of the most recently released games, and that's Mario and Luigi Brothership. Now, I don't think this is necessarily a bad game, I just don't think this is a game I should have paid full price for. Now, first of all, let's just talk about how this is a completely single-player experience. Nintendo are the champions at doing incredible couch co-op experiences, but they decided with a game that is focused all on companionship and brothership to make it entirely single player. And what makes this make even less sense is the fact that they have separate controls on the Joy-Con to control them both independently. Like, although they follow one another when you run around the world, they both have separate jump buttons that you use not only in the world, but also in the turn-based battle. So it really wouldn't have been that hard to make it couch co-op, but it's not. So right, let's move on. Now, I think the main reason why I think this game isn't worthy of full price is it's just missing some of that Nintendo magic. And I think where this is felt the most is in the dialogue and the story. It just feels repetitive, it feels surface level. Take, for example, Mario RPG and Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door. Both of them keep the essence of what it is to be a Mario game alive, whilst also giving you funny and engaging dialogue. And this just doesn't have that. And although the story in itself is pretty interesting, where you get dragged into a brand new world that's in dire need of your help, as the Tree of Life has died, meaning that the whole land has broken up into separate pieces and requires you being shot out of a cannon to try and join them all back up together until the new Tree of Life has fully grown. The issue is the way in which this story is given to you is just a little bit flat. I did have a lot of fun with the combat, however. It's much like the likes of Mario RPG that requires timed button presses, which I personally really enjoy as it's easy to switch off during turn-based battles, and this kept me really engaged. I just think for me, if you're going to spend this much on a Mario game, you should probably buy Paper Mario or Mario RPG over the price of this one. There are also some points in the game where it looked like it was going to present you a puzzle, and then you click one button and watch Luigi just figure it out in front of you. And I'm sad those elements weren't more interactive. Next up is Sunhaven. Now, this was one of my most anticipated Nintendo Switch releases for the last 2 years, as this Switch port has been a long time in the making, which makes putting this on this list even more difficult, because the fact is, as of right now, the Nintendo Switch port is just not great. You see, Sunhaven is actually an absolutely fantastic farming sim. It mixes together elements of fantasy with your normal farming sim stuff, all with a fantastic RPG-like story. And it truly is a very ambitious farming sim. The town itself is absolutely huge, and you soon find out that this isn't the only town that you can go and explore. And the towns themselves, although massive, also feel so full of life, as no matter where you go, you'll always pass some NPCs just out and about living their life. It's also a game where you will never run out of things to do. There's always different quests for you to go on each day, be it main storyline or friendship quests, with some of the areas being places that you can't get to until you find certain resources or craft certain stuff, so I never felt lost as to what to do next. The issue is, on the Nintendo Switch, this is just incredibly buggy. First up, we have the constant game crashes, which is made even worse by the fact that there is no save button. There is a save and quit button, but not one to allow you to save and carry on, meaning that you can lose upwards of 20+ minutes progress, which just makes this all the more frustrating. And if you did want to use the save and close button, then you'll be in for a long wait before you can load back into the game, as most of the loading screens in this seem to be pretty long. And times where it doesn't give you a black loading screen, instead you'll get this really weird laggy glitch until the game manages to catch up to where you were before. Loading isn't the only issue either. There's a ton of different bugs, some of which are small, like for example when you talk to certain NPCs, the character won't really load up on the side, so you can see who you're talking to, but you don't get the nice character sprite to go alongside of it. But there's also talk on Twitter of people being completely soft locked out of the game, with these bugs basically meaning that they're unable to get any further in the main storyline until it's fixed. The version that you get on the Switch is also not the exact same version that you can get on the PC. One of the biggest things missing on the Switch version is multiplayer, which I know a lot of people are looking forward to. The Switch also isn't running the most current update either, so when that arrives, we might also be facing even more bugs. And although the controller controls have come a long way since I last tried to play this on controller on PC, they're still not great. It just overall feels a little bit clunky. There were times that it made me frustrated that I couldn't just get a mouse and click the thing I wanted. And some aspects of the UI were pretty hard to see on the Switch, especially telling you which button to use for the spells. It took me a little bit of time to figure out what that was, as it was like 2 pixels big. And I'm really sad to see the game release in this state. It really is fantastic when you can actually play it and not find yourself being locked out of it, or the game crashing constantly. I couldn't even enjoy my playthrough as I was just terrified of it crashing and losing a ton of progress again. That being said, the devs are actively trying to fix all of these bugs, but seeing as it's the Nintendo Switch, these will take some time to be implemented. So there's a chance when this game releases for everyone else, because at the moment it is region locked to certain regions and it's not actually available in Europe yet, so I had to go and make an American eShop account just to be able to play the game. But fingers crossed when Europe gets it in mid-December that this will be playable and in a better state, so I'll keep you updated. Next, let's talk about Orange Seasons. Now, I personally feel like I'm a pretty chill person. However, when I played Orange Seasons, that really put me to the test. This has to be one of the most frustrating and infuriating farming sims I have ever played. And for a finished game, this really didn't feel all that much finished. On paper, this should have been a game that I would love, as this sees you make your farming dreams come true when you, with your parents' help, save enough money to buy a plot of land on the village of Orange Town, and will see you grow crops, raise animals, fish and mine to try and make your farm the best that it can be. Now, at first, my biggest worry going into this was whether Orange Seasons would stand out in what is a pretty saturated category at this point. As to be a good farming sim in 2024, it's not enough for it to just be a farming sim. But at least I can say Orange Seasons stood out, just all for the wrong reasons. And you don't even have to take my word for it. This is one of the first cozy games which I've looked at on Steam that has a very negative review, so I'm not alone in feeling these feelings. Now, Orange Seasons has a little bit of history to it in that the game itself changed hands midway through production, which might be largely why this feels completely unfinished. Now, in Orange Seasons, you're actually in a town with other farmers, which means the map is quite large, as you'll often go past other people's plots of lands in order to get where you want to go. But for some reason, the developers decided that we didn't really need a full map, and instead we were going to get this. And that meant for someone like me who is directionally challenged, I couldn't even remember where I lived and spent a solid part of the first day just trying to find my way back to my house. And the map frustrations only grew when I got given some of my first quests. You see, the first 5 quests of the game all require you to speak and talk to every single NPC there is in the game. The only issue is you don't know how many NPCs are in the game whatsoever, and you also don't know where they are. This meant that I spent 3 hours of the game just running around trying to find the NPCs, because until you found them all, not a single one of the quests would move forwards. So although games like Stardew Valley also have this as a quest, not everything in the entire game hinges on it. it, so it didn't feel nearly as frustrating. And even when you spoke to the NPCs who set you these quests, they wouldn't even tell you who you haven't met yet or how many NPCs that you were missing, meaning that you had to go over to the wiki page to figure out who you're yet to see and how to find them. And overall, this game doesn't feel finished. The balancing of money and friendships just doesn't seem to fit the pace of the game. The controls feel a little bit clunky, both on controller and keyboard and mouse if you play on PC. And when you compare this to other farming sims that are out now, it's just overall lacking. I feel like there's a lot of NPCs, but not a lot of character to them. And in a genre that is so saturated, this does very little to stand out among the rest. And I think the thing that solidified this as a regret to me was the fact that I just didn't have fun playing it at all. Every single quest just felt more like a chore than a joy to play. And there was no feeling of progressing or no reason to play and complete more quests, as I just couldn't see where the game was going. And I think my honest feeling is this feels like an early access game, but unfortunately it's the full release. So it's not something I can recommend buying. It's not something that I even feel confident knowing that it's going to get better. It just overall seemed like a little bit of a mess of a release, which is really sad because this seemed to have so much potential years ago when I first heard of it. Next, let's talk about Princess Peach Showtime. This has to be one of the biggest letdowns I've had in a game. And the trailers absolutely sold this game to me, as this saw you play as Peach, who was saving the world, all from a theatre, where each of the levels was actually a different play, filled with their own props, themes, and even special outfits for Peach to get dressed up in, giving her powers to help defeat the enemies. The issue is that the game took you around 8 hours to complete, maybe 15 if you're a completionist and you struggled at some of the levels, and once you've kind of tackled Princess Peach in one of the outfits, it began to feel a little bit monotonous when you had reoccurring levels in the same game. This game was also not up to Nintendo's usual standard, as long as you ignore Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, as there was pretty glaring performance issues even in the cutscenes. The story itself was lackluster and not really there for a full price Nintendo game. I honestly just feel like they didn't do Princess Peach justice. When they announced this for full price, I was hoping this would be along the lines of Kirby and the Forgotten Land, or even something like Mario Odyssey, with that level of polish and time taken over each of the levels. There was just little things that were lacking all around, be it the game length, the dialogue, the performance issues, that meant it fell nowhere near being Kirby or Mario level of gameplay. And it's one of those games where I wouldn't say definitely don't buy it. If you can find it on a pretty substantial sale, then I think you'll have a good time. Just bear in mind that the game's short and they could have done so much more with Princess Peach. She deserved better. Next, we're gonna lump 2 games together because the reason I regret them is the same, and that's Super Smash Bros. Ultimate and Switch Sports. Now, the reason I picked both of these games up was pure nostalgia. I remember getting a Wii as if it was yesterday. The fun of unboxing it and then getting to play Wii Sports for literal hours with my brother and with my family. And that was honestly some of my fondest memories with the Wii. So when Switch Sports got announced, I was equally as excited to get to play it, as I remember all those hours of being with my brother, having the best time ever playing Wii Sports. And this just looked like Wii Sports, but better. And I bought Super Smash Bros. Ultimate for the same reason. I literally remember running home from school to play Super Smash Bros. Melee with my brother, getting so excited when the new character appeared and cheering each other on so we could unlock it and play with them in the future. But the issue is, neither of these games hit the same when I was sat at home playing them by myself. And honestly, even when I'm with my family or with my friends, neither of these games are the ones we gravitate to play. It's literally normally Mario Party and Mario Kart, and that's about it. So it's not that I think either of these games are particularly bad. Super Smash Bros. Ultimate is a really solid addition to the Switch, and I know many people love them. It just didn't have the magic that Super Smash Bros. Melee did, not because the game isn't good, but because I'm not surrounded by people to play them constantly, and they're games better enjoyed with company. Although I will say, I think Switch Sports could have been a little bit more than it was. I did really enjoy the sports that they had in there, but I feel like they didn't really utilize the Joy-Cons as much as they could have. I think the only time I feel like the Joy-Cons make any use of accurate movement is in the sword fighting game, and that's by far one of my favorites. But the rest of them just seem a little bit basic with their movements. As I said, neither of them are bad. I just don't play them the way I thought I would. Next up, let's talk about Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, but more specifically, the DLC. Now, I bought this on a whim and a hope that this would mean that they'd update the base game so the performance and everything ran a little bit better. It turns out I was wrong, and the idea that I would buy the DLC to get me back into the game was also terribly wrong. I don't know about you guys, but I'm the type of person that if a game has severe frame drops, after a little bit, it tends to give me a really bad headache. And that's how I feel playing Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. No matter how much I want to get back into it, how much I want to play it, ultimately, I just find it frustrating and annoying to play because the performance is so bad. Not only that, but I feel like the fun of shiny hunting has completely gone for me in that game. If I feel like shiny hunting, I'll just go and boot up Pokemon Legends Arceus rather than Scarlet and Violet. It's a game I wanted to love so badly, but no matter how much I try and get into it, my heart just won't let me play it anymore. I will give credit where credit's due for Scarlet and Violet. The story in these games is far better than the story in Pokemon Sword and Shield. It's just not something I've picked up nearly as much. Next, let's go for another recent release, and that is Petite Island. Now, this isn't necessarily a bad game, but it is not a great Switch port. Now, in theory, this was something I was going to absolutely adore, as you play as a cat named Lily, who spent her childhood listening to stories of her grandpa's old adventures. And despite the fact that he doesn't remember exploring all of these faraway islands, his journal all about his journeys still remains. So Lily decides to set off on an adventure to relive his memories from his journal and take pictures from all of the locations he's been in the hopes of rejigging his memory. The issue, as you can probably see already, is just that the performance on the Switch is bad. There's constant frame drops, the game lags, the game jutters at points, and really gets in the way of what is, at some points, a really poignant story. And although I was really surprised at how big an area this game has for you to go and explore and run around, I wish that they made the area a little bit smaller and instead made it feel a bit more alive. Because you don't really see any NPCs running around, you don't see any movements to any of the towns or parks that you're in. Instead, if you do spot anyone, they're all stationary and stood in a single place. And although you can speak to them and they do have pretty good dialogue, it just makes the game feel a little less alive and a little bit more like, well, a game. The other downside about buying this on the Nintendo Switch is that on console this game is 57% more expensive. So you're paying a heck of a lot more for it to run an awful lot worse. And I truly hope this is something they patch going forwards. As someone who has a grandparent suffering from Alzheimer's right now, I really felt like the story had some good messages and some good meaning behind it. It's just a shame that it's let down once again by being a not great Switch port. Another game severely let down by its Switch port is Lake. Now, this is actually an incredible cozy game, and I can recommend it on literally anything but the Nintendo Switch. As this is a game that sees you play as Meredith, who takes a break from her big city career to deliver mail in her hometown. And what I really enjoy about this is the mix of story elements, where you get to not only talk to neighbors, but also decide who to befriend and even start a romantic relationship with, but also the work elements as well, that will see you do everything to do with delivering mail. As you get given an address that you need to go to, and then it's up to you to jump in the van, drive it to the location, pick out the packages, and put them on the doorstep. And in theory, this should be a beautiful game. with it having a real rustic vibe to it that I really enjoyed. The only issue is this does not play well on the Nintendo Switch. The graphics are rough, the frame rates are equally as bad, and it just took this really pleasurable experience and made it effectively unplayable. If you do have the opportunity to play Lake on anything else, it's well worth it. It's such a unique game, but just not on the Nintendo Switch. Next up, let's talk about another full-price Nintendo Switch game, and that is Endless Ocean. Again, this is a fun game, but it's just not £50 worth of fun. As I genuinely feel like for full price, there really shouldn't be an AI voice in the game, especially not one that feels so unbelievably robotic and is essentially one of the only voices you hear in the entire game. Like, I get the idea she's meant to be a robot, but equally, did it really have to be such egregious AI? Endless Ocean is pretty simply an ocean exploration game. You get dropped into the water with a camera, and you're tasked with taking pictures of the beautiful wildlife as they swim around the landscape. Now, don't get me wrong, this game can be pretty at times, and it can be fun to swim around and take photos and explore different caves and areas that there is to see. And I did enjoy the 50-player online mode as well. I think the biggest issue though is just it's not very immersive. For example, if there's a shoal of fish in front of you and you swim through them, they will not react to your presence whatsoever. And for me, this really began to take me out of the diving experience. I also felt like the single player modes were just so handholdy, and I didn't find the story fun whatsoever. So all I really wound up doing is just going out and playing the online player mode. But the other issue is there just really isn't that many people playing the game anymore. So it's unlikely you're ever going to have a full lobby of people swimming around taking pictures of fish. Now, I wasn't someone who played the original Endless Ocean games, but from what I've heard from other people, that this game was a real step down from what the franchise can normally produce. And it's such a shame because I was looking for a game like this on my Nintendo Switch so badly, and I just wish that it had a little bit extra to make me want to come back and play it, because for £50, I think I played it twice before I just gave up. Another game I regret paying full price for is Luigi's Mansion 2. Now, Nintendo have this real habit of giving us remakes and remasters at full Nintendo Switch price. And I think my biggest issue or my biggest regret with Luigi's Mansion 2 is that it was the same price as Luigi's Mansion 3, but I just didn't find it anywhere near as good. Luigi's Mansion 3 was to me a really solid first-party title, and I loved its balance of little battle segments with the puzzle solving, and I found it genuinely really enjoyable. But Luigi's Mansion 2 not only didn't look as good, I don't feel like the graphics were anywhere near as good as Luigi's Mansion 3, but I also just didn't find the puzzles as enjoyable. I don't know if it's the lack of Gooigi, because I feel like that really added something to the third game, or what exactly was missing, but it's just not as good, and I'm frustrated that it cost the same amount. Next is another game that was thoroughly let down by its Switch port, which seems to just be a real trend for this year on the Nintendo Switch, and that's Garden Witch Life. Now, this was another game for me that just didn't feel finished. In fact, I don't think it was finished, as at launch I'm pretty sure they told us a bunch of things that we could expect to come to the game in the following months, and I really wish they left this cook for a little bit longer. Garden Witch Life had so much of what I thought I'd love in it. You play as a little witch from the big city who has just lost their job, and as a result decides to start a brand new life on a tiny island. And this will see you do anything from growing a magical garden, decorating the house which you of course get given, to caring for cute creatures and making friends. The issue is that this game does not look great on the Nintendo Switch, and despite the fact that it has different graphic settings, even giving you a mode that says it boosts performance, the frame rates and the game itself look very rough. And I'm honestly surprised this got released on the Nintendo Switch in this state. But graphics aside, I think the game was a little bit lacking. The early game just really does not have much for you to do whatsoever. And despite the fact that you have a couple of quests like going out and making money, money and planting some of your crops, there really isn't a whole lot for you to do. So I basically just found myself going to sleep and skipping through as many of the days as possible as soon as I've done all the quests that were available. The world itself also just feels a little bit empty, which made me sad for a game that has magic in it and could have so much potential. And overall, it was just a game that I didn't come back to very often. I found myself getting a little bit bored when I was playing it. I was hoping for there to be more quests and more things for you to do outside of just making yourself some food each and every day, but sadly those quests were hard to find and didn't come very often. Of course, like with all the other games on this list with bad Switch ports, this is far better experienced on the PC, and I think there is a lot of work going into this to make the gameplay experience better. So hopefully this is a game that in 6 months when we check back in has had a complete rejig and is a fun and enjoyable experience, even on the Nintendo Switch. Our final game on today's list is a little bit of a controversial one, and that is Pokemon Snap. Now, do I think this game is enjoyable? Absolutely. I think this is the best looking Pokemon game on the entire Nintendo Switch. And I honestly really hope that they're going to bring out a Pokemon game that looks like this in the mainline franchise, because all the Pokemon look so cute and I love them so much. My issue is that I just don't feel like this game was worth the full price. Because to me, I didn't find all that much enjoyment in replaying each of the levels. Once I played them once or twice, I felt like I was thoroughly done with them and ready to move on. So the game itself didn't end up being that long for me. And although I enjoyed the initial excitement of seeing some of my favorite Pokemon in a way that I've never seen them before, I just wanted, for the money, for there to be so much more to this game. That's it for the Nintendo Switch games I regret buying. Let me know if you have a couple in the comments down below. And if you want to see some of the Nintendo Switch games I have played the most of, click this video here.